Disclaimer. I doesn't claim any of the arts. All the pictures shown belongs to the respective artist and company. If you are original owner and want me to remove the video, I will do it immediately. Just send me an email to inform me. And if you like my content, please subscribe to my channel.
Chapter begins, and we see a sudden knock at the door broke Luca's train of thought. He turned his head toward the sound, hesitated briefly, then stood up from the sofa and walked to open it. Standing on the other side was the dormitory head, a young woman with short hair and a cheerful, almost childlike smile. She seemed surprised to see him. "Oh," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of awkwardness. At that moment, Luca remembered something Giselle had told him. She's the most unhinged person in the entire academy. Yet, as he looked at the girl before him, she didn't seem deranged at all. "Nice to meet you," she said with enthusiasm, her voice lively and warm. "I'm Barbara, the head of the dormitory." Luca studied her closely before replying in a calm tone. "I'm Luca, Imperial Guard trainee," he added as his cybernetic enhancements activated. A red interface appeared in his vision, scanning and analyzing her appearance. Barbara's smile widened. "Hi, Luca. I rushed over as soon as my classes ended. Did you wait long?" Her words faded slightly in Luca's mind as he focused on her details. Her cuffs were frayed, her clothes looked worn out, and she didn't seem to have a last name, an indicator of her lower-class background. The most unhinged. He thought to himself, "I don't sense that from her. Maybe Giselle just dislikes people from the lower sectors." Snapping out of his thoughts, Luca replied simply, "No, I just arrived." Barbara let out a small sigh of relief. "That's good to hear. How should I address you?" "Just call me Luca," he said plainly. "I'm also from the lower sectors." Her smile grew even brighter at his response. "All right, Luca, you're really impressive. Becoming an Imperial Guard trainee, despite being from the lower sectors, is no small accomplishment." Luca met her gaze steadily and replied, "The same could be said for you. Becoming the head of the dormitory is quite an achievement as well." She interrupted with a pure and genuine smile. Luca observed her silently for a moment and thought to himself, "She must have worked incredibly hard to get where she is, just like me." Barbara clapped her hands together with excitement. "Come on, I'll show you around the dorms. It's part of my duty as dorm head." Without saying much, Luca followed behind her, still observing her closely. As they walked together, something droplet of water falling from her hair. She just showered, he noted internally. Her classes must have just ended. Either she's incredibly pressed for time, or she values efficiency above all else. Later, inside one of the academy buildings, Luca stood beside Giselle, who was watching him with a critical eye and crossed arms. She sighed audibly before speaking. "At least you're dressed appropriately this time," she remarked dryly. "You're finally listening to me." Luca smirked but chose not to respond. "Let's go to class," she continued briskly. "My father has instructed me to attend classes with you for an entire week." Luca's expression darkened at this announcement. A whole week, he thought grimly. This is going to drive me insane. As they started walking down the corridor together, a familiar voice called out, "Giselle!" Luca turned instinctively toward the voice and immediately recognized it. It was Barbara. She approached them energetically and greeted Giselle with enthusiasm. "It's been so long since we've talked." Without even sparing Barbara a glance, Giselle replied in an icy tone, "Go away, Barbara." Unfazed by Giselle's coldness, Barbara tilted her head slightly in an almost playful manner and said cheerfully, "I just wanted to say hello." Giselle stopped walking abruptly and turned to face Barbara directly. Stepping closer with an intimidating glare, she said sharply, "Hello, Barbara. Now leave me alone. I have nothing else to say to you." Barbara took a small step back as if startled but didn't lose her composure entirely. Without acknowledging Luca further, Giselle turned back around and walked away briskly. "Hurry up, Luca," she called over her shoulder. "You don't want to be late for your first class." Luca glanced at Barbara briefly before following Giselle down the hallway. As they walked in silence for a moment, he finally broke it by asking casually, "You seem to know Barbara pretty well." Without turning around or slowing down, Giselle replied flatly, "Only by appearance. We joined the academy around the same time." "You don't seem to like her." Luca pressed further. This time there was no response. Giselle ignored him entirely. As they continued walking through the corridor together, Luca reflected on what he had observed so far. Giselle called Barbara the most unstable person in CFA Academy, he thought skeptically. Yet Barbara keeps trying to interact with her despite being treated so harshly. Something about their dynamic felt strange and unresolved to him, but ultimately irrelevant to his own goals. What matters, he reminded himself firmly, is surviving these next 2 months so I can achieve noble status. He pushed aside thoughts of their relationship and focused instead on his future. Later that day, Luca sat alone on a bench outside one of the academy buildings, idly flipping a knife between his fingers while lost in thought. This week was supposed to be about enduring boring classes, he mused darkly as his grip tightened around the blade. But now I find myself oddly curious about their relationship. He sighed heavily. There wasn't much else in this place designed for aristocrats that could hold his interest. His thoughts shifted briefly to Flex, a rival who had refused to fight him earlier out of fear of losing, and frustration bubbled up within him again. If no one fights me soon, he thought bitterly, as heat surged through him once more, I'm going to get rusty. The chemicals coursing through his body from training seemed to amplify his desire for combat until it became almost unbearable. Suddenly, a sharp voice interrupted his brooding. Hey, Imperial Guard trainee! Catching his knife midair with practiced ease, Luca turned toward the source of the voice with raised eyebrows and asked bluntly, Yeah, what do you want? A well-dressed boy with neatly combed brown hair stood in front of Luca, his expression filled with anger. You've been hanging around Miss Giselle constantly this week. What exactly is your connection to her? Luca gave a sly smile. Do I really need to answer that? What's the matter? Do you have a thing for Giselle? The boy's face turned a deep shade of red. Luca observed him for a moment, then let out a sigh and shook his head. Giselle? Seriously? Out of everyone, you're interested in her? With a dismissive laugh, Luca closed his eyes and muttered softly, What is it about that girl that you even like so much? The words hit the boy like a spark to dry tinder. You lowlife, take that back right now. The boy lunged at Luca, throwing a wild punch aimed directly at his face. Instantly, Luca's cybernetic enhancements activated, sending adrenaline coursing through his veins. Time seemed to slow down. With almost no effort, Luca sidestepped the attack and caught the boy's wrist mid-swing. The noble let out a startled cry as Luca's grip tightened, halting him completely. Luca exhaled sharply through his nose, clearly irritated. I can't believe I'm wasting energy on someone like this. Get it together. The boy, now trembling and visibly upset, groaned in frustration as tears welled up in his eyes but didn't fall. So, you're really not involved with Giselle in any way? He slumped onto the bench beside Luca, holding his wrist. Luca tilted his head slightly. Nope. Then he smirked again. Now let me ask you something. The noble boy shot him a suspicious look. And why should I bother answering you? Luca clenched his fist tightly. Damn it, I want to beat this guy so badly. He took a deep breath to calm himself and muttered through gritted teeth. I'll tell Giselle you're a decent guy. Without pausing, he added, Why does Giselle dislike Barbara so much? Boy hesitated briefly before responding. It wasn't always like that. It's because Barbara was cursed by that witch. Luca narrowed his eyes at the mention of a curse. Cursed? And who exactly is this witch? The noble scoffed dismissively. I'm talking about Barbara herself. Anyone who gets close to her ends up involved in some kind of incident where androids malfunction or go haywire. Even the most advanced AI systems, which are famous for their reliability, start acting up whenever she's near them. We started calling it Barbara's curse. Luca frowned thoughtfully. Statistically speaking, that does seem improbable, but it's hardly Barbara's fault. That's what makes it so unsettling. What kind of person actively seeks out new friends when they know anyone close to them might be in danger? That's why everyone avoids her, and why she ended up as the dormitory head, a position with no perks and endless responsibilities. Luca tapped his fingers against the bench as he pondered this information. So she wasn't chosen as dormitory head because of her skills or qualifications. Suddenly, the boy pointed toward a nearby group of students. Look over there, even now. Luca followed the direction of his gaze just in time to see a glass of water spill all over Barbara. A girl with vibrant orange hair smirked mischievously and feigned innocence as she said mockingly, Oops, my bad, I'll clean your clothes for you, so take them off. Barbara gave an awkward laugh and tried to brush it off casually. Right here? No thanks. I'll just go change in my room. The orange-haired girl tilted her head mockingly and raised her voice so everyone could hear her taunt. Did everyone hear that? Did Barbara just reject my generosity? Come on, take off your clothes and give them to me. I'll return them spotless." Barbara hesitated for a moment, closing her eyes as though wrestling with some inner turmoil before reluctantly moving her hand toward her collar to comply. Luca's eyes narrowed with a sharp intensity. Now it all made sense. The same situation must have occurred on the day she showed me around the dormitories. That explains why, despite being pressed for time, she had to take a moment to clean up. His fingers clenched tightly around the knife he held. "Looks like luck is on your side, Barbara." With a swift flick of his wrist, the blade flew through the air, slicing effortlessly through the glass held by the orange-haired girl. The shards scattered to the ground, accompanied by a high-pitched scream that pierced the atmosphere. Luca stepped forward confidently, stopping just inches away from the group. His voice was low and filled with an ominous threat. "Stop it right now and leave her alone." The red-haired girl's face twisted in anger, her fury boiling over. "Do you even understand what you're doing? He interrupted her without hesitation, his tone icy and unyielding. "I don't care if you're a woman. If you push me, I won't hesitate to punch you in the face." The chilling menace in his words left them stunned into silence. Gradually, they turned away one by one, their egos bruised and their pride shattered. As Luca watched them retreat into the distance, a gentle voice called out from behind him. "Hey, Luca." Turning around, he met Barbara's gaze. Her damp hair clung to her skin, framing her unreadable expression, until she suddenly broke into a sweet smile, her tone light and innocent as she spoke. "Thank you, Luca." A mischievous grin spread across his face as he responded with a playful glint in his eye. "So, am I close enough now to become a target for crazy androids?" Breathing heavily, Enrico Lacan wiped the sweat dripping from his forehead, his face pale and filled with anxiety. "That woman was Calisicano. Luca, you've tangled with someone you shouldn't have." Luca frowned, trying to piece things together. He dragged me aside so urgently. "What's the big deal?" Crossing his arms, he responded with a casual tone. "I know who she is. A family like hers, with no real power, won't be a problem." Enrico's face grew grim. "That's just a cover. The Cano family controls a gang in the lower sectors. They earn their money through illegal trading. Right now they're likely digging into your background." Luca gave a sly grin, his voice laced with amusement. "Then I hope they act soon, because I'm absolutely bored out of my mind." Enrico let out a frustrated sigh. "You need to be cautious. They have a reputation for getting revenge. If anything happens to Kilesa," he hesitated before continuing. "They even went after Barbara because of it. All because Kisa's boyfriend ended up cursed by her." Luca raised an eyebrow, processing the information carefully. "Got it," he replied. At that moment, Luca's attention shifted as he noticed Giselle approaching with her usual irritated expression. A mischievous thought crossed Luca's mind as he glanced at Enrico. "Why don't you go say hi to Giselle? You like her, don't you?" Enrico's face turned bright red instantly. I'm fine just admiring her from afar. Just don't forget you promised to talk me up to her, okay? See you." Without waiting for a response, Enrico dashed off as if his life depended on it. Giselle watched him retreat with a look of mild disgust before turning her attention to Luca. "So you've made a friend already?" Luca shrugged nonchalantly. "Yeah, his name's Enrico Lacan. He's a nice guy." Giselle chuckled softly, her lips curving into a smirk. "Nice. He gives me the creeps. It feels like he's always lurking somewhere nearby." Luca glanced at Enrico disappearing into the distance and then back at Giselle. "Sorry, Enrico," he thought to himself. "No matter how hard you try, some things are just out of reach." The scene shifted to the office of Guide Albert, the dean of the Imperial Guard Cadets, a man with striking white hair, who sat behind his desk twirling Luca's knife casually between his fingers. Guide spoke in a calm, yet firm tone. "Did you really throw a knife at another student, Luca? Even if it was just a pocket knife, it could stir up trouble. I know this place must feel stifling for someone like you, but try not to overdo it." Luca met Guide's gaze and replied evenly. "Understood." Internally, he thought, as expected from a former Imperial Guard, he's letting me off lightly. Leaning back in his chair, Guide continued thoughtfully, "The students here don't learn how to fight like you do. They're like sheep in front of a wolf." Luca smirked again and replied confidently, "And yet they act as if they can't be bitten." Guide laughed heartily at that remark. "Now I see why Who's likes you." His tone shifted to something more serious as he ran a hand through his hair and added, "But remember this, these students may seem like sheep now, but among them are monsters disguised in sheep's clothing. He handed Lucas' knife back while locking eyes with him sharply. Compared to wolves like you, those monsters are far more dangerous. Being young and reckless is fine. Just don't cross the wrong one. Taking the knife back and slipping it into his pocket, Luca nodded slightly and said, "I'll remember that." As he left the office, his thoughts churned. If I'm here chasing monsters anyway, my real target is far worse. A witch's curse. Later that night, Luca walked along the dimly lit path behind the gymnasium. His footsteps echoed softly in the quiet darkness as anticipation built in his chest. Curfew has long passed, and word about me saving Barbara has already spread. He thought about the rumors. If they're true, that so-called curse should activate soon, causing those androids to malfunction and come after me. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps snapped him out of his thoughts. A voice broke through the stillness from behind him. "You're Luca, the cadet who was sent here?" Turning around sharply, Luca locked eyes with a boy who had dark hair and stood confidently before him. Narrowing his gaze slightly, Luca assessed him quickly. "Great, just some random small fry I've never seen before." Almost on cue, two more boys stepped out from the shadows surrounding him on either side. Their presence didn't feel threatening to Luca. He remained calm but alert as he raised an eyebrow and asked coolly, "Do you need something from me?" The dark-haired boy stepped forward with an arrogant smirk plastered on his face. "Kalesa sends her regards," he began smugly. "In our family tradition, the Kano family, we repay losses through greetings like this one." His tone turned mocking as he added sarcastically, "You wouldn't want your superiors knowing you got beaten up by mere students now, would you? After all, you're such an amazing Imperial Guard cadet." Luca's eyes glinted faintly with irritation as he thought, "What an annoyance. Do they really think they can touch me?" The boy continued arrogantly, "But hey, I'll give you one chance. Go apologize to Miss Kalesa on your knees right now, and she might let it slide." Luca's lips curled into an icy smile as he replied coldly, "I'll also give you one last chance to walk away unharmed, because I doubt kids who've never seen real combat stand any chance against me." Angered by Luca's confidence, the dark-haired boy clenched his fist tightly as sparks of electricity crackled along his prosthetic limb. Steam hissed from mechanical joints in his legs as he lunged forward at high speed, shouting angrily, "Take this!" He aimed a powerful punch directly at Luca. His gaze sharpened as he studied the movements of his opponent. "Tuh, that prosthetic is far too advanced for someone like him," he thought critically. The black-haired boy, undeterred by his failed attempt, let out a frustrated snarl and charged forward again. "Let's see you dodge this one." Luca remained unmoved, his hands still resting in his pockets. His demeanor was calm, his focus unwavering as he tracked the boy's approach. Just as the attack neared him, a sudden flash of bright red light illuminated the alley. All eyes turned toward the source of the light, a robotic figure stepping out from the shadows. Its voice was flat and mechanical as it addressed them. "Hello, do you require assistance?" The black-haired boy froze momentarily, his confidence faltering at the unexpected intrusion. He whipped his head toward one of his companions and barked angrily, "What's going on here? Didn't you say you checked everything? You told me there wouldn't be any trolls around." The other boy stammered nervously. "I did. Androids aren't supposed to be here. I have no idea why this thing showed up." Their leader clicked his tongue in irritation before scoffing. "Listen up, cadet. I'll let you off today. But don't think this is over. We'll settle this another time. I'm not stupid enough to fight in front of an android. Let's go." As they began to retreat, one of the lackeys muttered under his breath, "That timing was perfect." The android's glowing red eye flickered ominously as it repeated its question, "Do you require my assistance?" One of the boys sneered at it dismissively. "No? Get out of here." Suddenly, the robot jerked unnaturally and blocked their path with a sharp movement. Its voice distorted into a glitchy stutter. "That is not possible." Luca remained silent but watched intently as events unfolded before him. A surge of energy coursed through the android's frame, causing its red lights to flare, dangerously bright. Without warning, it struck. The android's metallic fist collided with one of the boys' heads, producing a sickening sound as blood splattered in every direction. The victim's head was obliterated instantly, leaving behind a lifeless body that crumpled to the ground. The remaining boys froze in shock and horror, their faces pale as they stared at their fallen friend. Luca stood motionless, observing everything with an unreadable expression. The black-haired boy stumbled backward in fear, as the android crouched low, its joints creaking ominously while preparing to strike again. With terrifying speed, it lunged toward him, its glowing red eyes locked onto its next target. Energy radiated from its raised fist like a concentrated shockwave. The boy's face contorted in terror as he screamed desperately, "It's Barbara's curse! The witch's curse is real!" Before the android could deliver its killing blow, a powerful kick slammed into its head, sending it flying backward with tremendous force. The impact cracked its metallic faceplate as it tumbled through the air before regaining stability. Its red glow intensified in response. The one who had delivered the kick was none other than Luca. Luca exhaled slowly and stepped forward toward the machine. His voice was steady as he spoke. A Cephea Academy student shouldn't believe in such superstitions. The android straightened itself mechanically, while its core emitted a loud whirring sound as it recalibrated. Luca studied it closely. Its erratic, pulsing red lights hinted at something far more dangerous. It's operating at maximum output. But that won't last long, just a few minutes at best. His sharp gaze focused on the trembling machine before him. It must have calculated that fighting me requires burning through all its energy reserves. This isn't just a random malfunction. Someone deliberately caused this. His fists clenched tightly as anticipation surged within him. A smile spread across his face as he declared confidently, "Well then, let's see if you can keep up." Lucas' eyes sparkled with excitement as he prepared for battle against the formidable machine ahead of him. And with that, this chapter ends.
Thank you for watching this video until the end. Support this channel by liking this video and subscribing the channel. And if you want me to recap another manhwa or manga, write its name in the comments section. And if you want to know that what happened in previous chapters, you can watch them in this channel. Stay tuned for next chapters.